Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Clean Energy Edge. I'm Russ Bates. So today we're diving into a product that really reimagines the solar carport, not just in form, but in function, materials, and the very important deployment speed. It's called the Heliostation and is designed by the team at VCT Group. So joining me today are really the driving forces behind it, at least two of them, Zach Jolliffe and Patrick Boot. So we're going to talk about really what inspired the Heliostation, how it solves major challenges with the current carport systems, and why VCT is partnering with a pretty cool company called NextGen to bring it to the U.S. market. Zach, Patrick, thanks for being here.
Yeah, great to be on the show, Russ.
Maybe you're us.
Awesome. Well, let's start at the beginning. What really inspired the development of the Heliostation system? What was really the thought behind that? Because it's very cool and innovative. So tell us a little bit more about kind of the origin of that.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in there. So the Heliostation was born out of some project experience that VCT had back in 2018. So in 2018, we built our very first solar carport as a company. And it was built with a European product. It was made out of structural aluminum. And there was a lot of things that we really, really liked about that. You know, prior to that time, we had built a lot of rooftop solar. We had built a lot of tracking systems as well. And when we were approached about this project, we initially pitched trackers in this parking lot. And it was the developer, the owner of this property, that was fairly insistent on carports. And so we looked around. We looked at what was available on the market. We picked a product, we built with it, and overall had a pretty good experience. But we saw some things that we thought we could improve as well. And after that project had wrapped up, the product that we built with was discontinued. And we didn't find an option on the market that we felt like was viable and was going to do what we wanted it to do. And so we got into our own design at that point. And that's probably a pretty good starting point for the rest of the conversation here, because the design story is interesting. The product features that we have come up with are interesting as well.
So this system was designed by folks who actually go out and build, not, I'm sure you've got engineers that are part of that, but it's not an engineer sitting there with their mouse or their pencil drawing it out and not really understanding what it takes out in the field to put these things in. Is that fair to say?
Totally fair. One thing we say around here from time to time is built by an EPC for EPCs. And so we are thinking about the builders of these systems as a builder of these systems.
Well, that's so important as a builder. I'm an IBW electrician, and I've had to scratch my head several times wondering, how do they expect this to work the way they have it designed? You always find a way, but you want to get through those challenges. So speaking of that, every innovation, it really has its early design hurdles. What were some of the toughest challenges that you guys faced with getting this concept off the ground? How did you overcome those?
Yeah, so one thing we noticed about the system after we built our first one, which was not our own product, was that there was no water management built into the system. You know, if you've seen a solar carport before, you've likely seen gaps between panels, and that means that water comes through. When it rains, the water drips through. Drips are annoying, but in northern climates, like here in Canada or in the northern US, drips turn into icicles at the right time of year. And icicles can be a liability as well. And we saw both drips and icicles on our system, this kind of competitive product that we built with for our first project, the first winter after we built it. And so water management is something that we knew we wanted to solve. And the way it got solved was pretty interesting and a key part of our value proposition. We noticed with the other system that the long edge of the panels was supported by the purlin. And we thought that we could reduce material count and cost in the system overall if we spread those purlins out, had the panels in portrait instead of landscape. And so we designed a rail to support the long edge of the panels so that we could reduce material count overall, and integrated water management directly into that. And we'll talk more about how we accomplish that kind of throughout the conversation here today. But we've got a patent pending on that part of our system. It's a key part of our value proposition. And when you build with VCT's Heliostation, you will have a system that does not leak, it does not drip on you, it does not drip on your clients' heads. And in the wintertime, there is no liability from ice as well.
Yeah, that's an important point. It really sticks out. You think of the annoyance of, all right, it's raining and you're going to have water dripping on you. That's one thing. That's annoying. But the dangers of, when you do have those icicles forming and they're going to come down at some point, right? So I don't want to catch any of those. So I think this is pretty important. Are you seeing a lot of use for that I know you guys are in Canada, so probably more so than maybe Texas, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. The northern U.S. climate is very, very similar to where we are. We're just within about an hour and a half of the U.S. border where we are in Canada. We're about an hour west of Toronto. And, the climate here is very similar to Michigan, very similar to New York, very similar to Pennsylvania. And so a lot of those northern U.S. states have got, pretty much the same weather that we get here in Canada. And if you build a solar carport and there's no water management and you're in these kind of climates, you are going to see some ice forming underneath. And for us, we saw icicles that got up to several feet long the first winter that this other system was installed. And if you put that over top of a car, over top of a kid, you're asking for trouble at some point. And so, we're seeing good pickup for our system anywhere where liability is a concern, where it's not always just about the absolute lowest price to build, but there is some concern for what it looks like to operate this thing over the long term. And so any kind of municipality, any kind of private business that's staying in their building for the long term, they're thinking about these things. And it's not just about the total project cost. It's about what that thing's going to look like over its lifetime.
Yeah, that's key. And I've noticed you guys have made some, I'll say, unique material choices, like using aluminum instead of steel. So how does that affect, let's say, the system's durability, cost, and then the scalability?
Yeah, for sure. So aluminum is definitely a highlight of our product, and one thing that we loved about the other product that we built our first project with. But I've been talking a lot. Maybe Patrick, you want to kind of jump in and just chat about aluminum and some of the reasons why we like it?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think what's interesting about using a product or using a material like aluminum is that we can choose different material process or manufacturing processes to work with that aluminum. So we have designed a series of aluminum extrusions where we can control and design and be really intentional about the profiles and the shapes that we're making. So we can integrate things like cable management. We can build in gutters to manage water, and we don't have to be welding those elements on site. So aluminum just gives us this pliability, this creativity to be able to apply to solve different problems out there, and I don't know, add some innovation into the constructability and the features of our Heliostation products.
Yeah, whenever I think about aluminum and obviously the weight difference, right? If it's engineered and can support this, which I know it is with knowing your guys' product, that makes a big difference for the installation work in the field, as far as, equipment, as far as manpower, even as far as what trades would do that, I think, to a certain degree. So that's got to help with the economic piece of this, using aluminum as opposed to steel, and all of the advantages with regards to the labor installation work. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. And what you that translates into cost savings in your labor force. A quicker bolt together construction on site means you don't have to have specialized welding and steel fabrication labor or subcontractors. This is bolt together construction. That sure you need some, maybe a telehandler, or sometimes for our larger frames, crane to lift these pieces up into position. But then the modular design, they bolt together pretty quickly, and then you're flying, building frame by frame by frame with a sort of construction field team.
Yeah, you're cutting labor hours, those man hours, out of of the project, just because it's going to go faster, not as maybe where you would need say a 30-ton crane. Maybe now you can do it with telehandler or a smaller crane. And I've got to say, it's going to go a bit faster just being aluminum, easier to handle and get in there and mess with. So that's been my experience from, working with steel compared to aluminum. It's lighter, it's easier to handle. So it makes it a bit easier. So now that's very important. I think our audience is going to value that. And you guys are also moving into the US market. What really excites you guys most about bringing this technology to the U.S.? Obviously, it's you guys are doing great in Canada, and you talk about the northern U.S. states that are similar to climate that Canada has, but there's also other areas that you want to get into. But I guess tell me what your thoughts are as far as entering the U.S. market. What really excites you about that?
The big thing I'd say is just that there's a lot more market to address, right? And the U.S. is a lot bigger than Canada. There's a lot more solar EPCs doing work in the U.S. And we think we've got a great value proposition here. We've built with this product a whole bunch ourselves. We're still busy building with it here in Ontario. And we're excited to bring everything that we've learned building with it, to more companies and more companies in the U.S. We do think that we do great in the northern climates as well, but water management can be an important feature elsewhere as well. Even in drier climates, you might want to cistern that water for irrigation or for drinking water, right? Which can be another part of our value proposition. But around the water management, we still think the value proposition is strong. The advantages of prefabrication, right? It being a similar structure that you can build with over and over. And then, we haven't really talked too much about it yet, but we get fantastic clearances from ground and spans with our system that allow you to cover a whole bunch of parking area, with a smaller amount of structure. And Patrick's a little bit more qualified to talk about this than I am because he spends more time there, but the working to make it more constructible all the time is a huge priority for us here at VCT. We are trying to make this thing better and better and better all the time. And we build with it ourselves, and we're trying to bring that knowledge to everybody else and kind of share it around the U.S. like we have been in Canada.
That continued innovation, I think, is very important. People seem to get complacent. I've seen that, and those companies that continue to innovate and say, "Hey, this is pretty good, but how can we make it better?" Very important. And Patrick, I'd love to hear more as far as when you're thinking of parking lots, parking spaces. You want as many parking spaces as you can have, right? That's very key. So if you don't have to have structure in those parking spaces or less than typical systems, I think that's a value. What can you add to that part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think there's a number of these pain points that we're trying to solve, right? We're trying to solve pain points for the building owner, for the EPC or constructor who's building this, and then for the end user. So, building off of what Zach was saying about spans and span size, we have some of the largest spans in the industry. Our monoslope, what we call our Mercury design, has spans, in nose-to-nose parking spots of almost 56 feet. So I just, in prep for this podcast, looked up what the length of a Ford F-150 is, and it's about just over 20 feet, approaching 21 feet. So can clearly, more than span two nose-to-nose F-150s in span. And our Pegasus design is a bit longer than that, about 62 feet. So easily covers two nose-to-nose parking spots. From the building owner perspective, bigger spans means a bigger sponge out there for the sun and ultimately a better payback. So, we're thinking about that, how many, because we're going, sort of switch from landscape to portrait in terms of panels, that directly translates to the value that system is bringing from a, energy produced perspective. I think from a constructability perspective, kind of the last point that Zach was talking about, my background is in product design. I studied industrial design in school, and you very quickly learn the value of iteration. and that your first idea is not going to be your best. But we carry that through into the ongoing development and evolution of our products. So we're out there watching our field staff put these together. We're having conversations all the time about little things that could be made easier, from planning and site mobilization all the way through to different tools that are available, putting these together in different climates and weather conditions, and working with uneven grade and all of these challenges that come up day to day in the building that aren't in these perfectly sort of controlled or engineer envisioned situations, but real life of putting these things together. We're always trying to make our products easier to construct.
Yeah, you're not shipping out like IKEA and it's out and you don't worry about it anymore. You guys are actually getting on the project site, talking to the installers, those craftsmen, to supervision, understanding what's going on there and seeing, all right, hey, here's something that we could do a little bit better. God, I think that's so important. I mean, what kind of things have you learned, not to put you on the spot, Patrick, but what kind of things have you learned from just being out there in the field working with, with these tradesmen of, hey, you might try to do this or you might try to do that? Because as a guy who worked in the trades for many years, I would have loved for someone to come out and say, hey, how could we do this a little bit better? Because we had teams that had so many different suggestions that would have made a big difference. Probably sold a lot more products. So
Yeah.
I am going to put you on the spot, Patrick. What can you share with us about that?
Yeah. So this was a couple projects ago, but one that comes to mind is, so we've got a lot of bolts and nuts and hardware that looks really similar, but is fractions of an inch different. And if you use up the short ones when you need long ones, or vice versa, then you can be left with a situation where you run out of pieces to put this whole connects Lego situation together. So something that we implemented was to color code those bolts, and to very quickly create a repeatable system to sort of systematize, always thinking about how can we batch information or batch a sub-assembly together that becomes routine to put together, and color coding the bolts was an aspect that really made that quick. And then you saw it happen on site. Instead of saying, I need 2 of those 7.5 inch, 1 1/4 diameter bolts, you say, give me 4 of the yellow ones. And then someone, it could be their first day on site, but it makes for a lot less time and error and miscommunication just by that small sort of thinking about how things get communicated on site and seeing it play out live.
Yeah, whenever you said, I'm thinking back to when I was working on my tools and like wire nuts, right? Hey, I need a handful of red wire nuts, or I need the little bitty blue wire nuts. There was no question. You knew what it was. I worked with a group of guys that I can't remember the numbers, but they had the catalog number. I need a 18-76 wire nut. I'm like, what the hell's that? You need a yellow wire nut. Okay, I understand that. So I think that is a great innovation. That's very cool. Very cool. Moving into the U.S. market, at the time of this recording, the U.S. market's a little bit weird right now. They just announced another 25%, so now it's 50% tariff on aluminum and steel products. But and you guys are in Canada, and I speak for us. We love our Canadian partners and neighbors, but still, we've got these tariffs in place, and who knows how long that's going to go. But the great thing is, VCT, you guys are looking to partner with fabricators here in the U.S. that can make these solutions here in the U.S. with U.S. Aluminum for the U.S. customer. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, we are definitely excited to partner with U.S.-based fabricators, aluminum experts, extrusion experts, that kind of thing. We work in renewable energy as an organization. We're conscious about sustainability. We want to localize production wherever we can. So it's important to us to establish those relationships and those partnerships as we really expand into the U.S. market. We want to be close to good transit routes. We want to be developing relationships with the aluminum industry and with good talent. We want to work with good collaborators. We often get approached by clients. You know, we have a portfolio of carport models in our Heliostation line, but we often get approached for custom projects. And so we're working closely with our Canadian-based aluminum extrusion partners to design new dies and to think about collaboratively solving problems with people who know more than we do. And we bring our expertise to the table. So we want to continue those kind of partnerships when we expand into the US.
Yeah, because a lot of projects here in the U.S. I know definitely. We work with the federal government, with state, county, and local governments, and a lot of them will have the BABA, the Buy American, Build American requirements. And it just really makes a lot of sense. I think it's very smart was what VCT is doing, partnering with folks here in the U.S. That eliminates any concern, any tariff, anything like that may be a concern for a developer or project owner, because it's going to be right here in the U.S. Plus, there could be a pretty big demand. I think there will be here in the U.S. And, you guys only have so much bandwidth there in Canada. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you about the EV infrastructure that we're starting to see more and more of. I drive an EV, my wife drives an EV. You're seeing more of them all the time. And of course, where do you charge is a piece of that. And solar canopies are such a great option to have EV charging. You guys have a little bit of a unique kind of design there and take. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So our view of the future of EV charging is that it'll look like gas stations do right now, where there's a canopy over top, right? Look at every gas station, it's got a canopy. It's because nobody wants to pump gas in the rain. Nobody wants to stand in the snow while it's, while they're pumping gas, and even hot sun. You don't want to stand in the hot sun if you don't have to. And we think EV charging is going to look like this in the future too, not only because of the user experience, but to protect the equipment. If you look at the cost of a level 3 charger, it is, a pretty penny to get these things installed, and UV damage and weather damage is a concern. And so, for the sake of protecting equipment and for the user experience, we expect EV charging to be done under canopies, throughout most of the market in coming years as the industry starts to mature. So we're trying to be intentional about kind of planning that into our systems as well. And so where we do our own installs, and we're happy to kind of share this knowledge with EPCs that we work with, we use a precast concrete footing. And there's conduit that runs through that. So you can put a pedestal on top of that concrete footing and service the parking spots around that footing with EV charging. The cool thing about it is the conduit's there even on the on the foundations that don't have the chargers yet. So from the owner's perspective, they're able to add, 2, 4, 6 chargers a year, add a couple a year at whatever pace they want to, so that they don't need to get back into civil work if they want to add some more chargers to their site.
That's so important, Zach. We see that all the time. Somebody says, yeah, I guess I want to go maybe put a charging station in. And we bring that foresight, same as you guys, of, all right, maybe you need one level 2 dual plug station or set of stations today. But what about tomorrow when there's more EVs on the road, and, a year from now and 2 years, being able to scale that as you need to when you're ready makes so much sense. So that sounds like exactly like what you guys are looking to do, kind of future-proof it.
Yeah, precisely. And we're trying to think long term. We're trying to think not only from the EPC's perspective, but also from the owner's perspective. We kind of here in Canada, we're affiliated with a renewable energy cooperative that owns a number of solar arrays, and we're used to looking at the long term on these things, and not just looking at year one projections on what the system's going to produce, not just looking at the kind of best case scenario for repairs and maintenance and all that. we're familiar with the long term. We're thinking about the long term, and we're trying to do this thing right from the get-go, rather than trying to do it as cheap as possible.
Now that I think that matters because these are investments, right? And they will pay off. It just depends on each particular situation. Are you guys looking at any like battery storage or any type of tied in with microgrids, anything like that? I mean, you're pretty flexible. Is that something you're kind of in your headlight range there, so to speak?
So we'd be happy to look at all different kinds of use cases. One of the things we haven't touched on yet is just kind of how we support EPCs, and we're happy, and this goes for all the EPCs out there. If you're chasing work, we're happy to help you. We're happy to get you some budgetary numbers so you can figure it out. And that goes for microgrids, that goes for big net metering systems, that goes for whatever kind of system you're going to go chase. And so, yeah, when you look at the use cases for solar canopies, there's so many, right? And so we've talked about EV charging. We can talk larger scale generation for big buildings with large power demands. We can talk microgrids. We've even looked at some projects where we're covering spaces for people rather than spaces for cars, where we're doing like a covered patio and people are going to picnic underneath of it. Covered walkways are another use case. And so there's lots and lots of places these things can go, and lots of ways that we can help the EPCs out there, help their customers find a good value proposition with a solar carport or solar canopy, to use the more generic term.
Yeah. I know in Europe, they have solar covered bike paths, is something that's been pretty, I don't know, I guess it's growing. I haven't seen any here in the US. I don't know, assuming you haven't seen them in Canada yet, but over in Europe, that's something that, you guys could definitely get into there as well. So is it, whenever an EPC works with you guys, they get a lot of support. Can you go a little bit more into detail of, let's say an EPC reaches out and says, here's what we've got. Here's the parking lot. Here's what we're trying to do. Can you go into, the support that VCT Group will provide for an EPC?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll start on the kind of like pre-sale side and then let Patrick chat about the post-sale side here. So when we're chasing an opportunity, you need some options. You need some budgetary costing to be able to float it out to a client for their consideration. And so anytime one of our clients comes to us and says, hey, I want to take a look at carports in this property or this parking lot or whatever, we've got an awesome team of people here at VCT who can take a look at that space and advise about the most ideal configurations that we can bring with our prefabricated shapes. And we've got a few different shapes, all right? We've got a monoslope, we've got a Y shape, we've got an A shape, we've got double row coverage, we've got single row coverage, and we can bring all of that to any particular project. And typically we ask for some kind of design target, right? So do you have a capacity in mind for the system? Or are we trying to hit a generation total for the site? Or is there a particular budget to design around? Or do you just want to optimize for the best possible return or the most possible coverage or something like that? And just with a couple quick parameters and an address, the team here can come up with some quick designs. We can show you how much coverage we're going to get, kind of approximate how much power that's going to generate in a year, and pretty quickly come up with some budgetary numbers that the EPCs out there can use to float past their clients for consideration. And then if we get onto something and it feels like we're going to find a deal, then we kind of jump into some more detailed work around the engineering.
When a sort of situation, when a deal is won, or when there's a project that's kind of alive and going, then that handoff comes to myself and my team, and we've been through it before. If it's VCT Group doing the construction, so then supporting an external an EPC partner, it is just second nature. So we can help advise on some of the things that would naturally fall into that EPC scope, like things you should be thinking about, like your building permit and impact assessments with the local grid and that kind of thing. We wouldn't take that on, but we can help navigate those waters, so to speak, because we've built these projects ourselves. So, and then there's the actual kind of engineering and design and execution of the carport structure itself. So, we're helping answer technical questions about material handling and any rentals, equipment rentals, and that kind of thing. What kind of staff size, what kind of field team you're going to need to construct this, estimated timelines, all of that kind of stuff. We're helping to answer those questions from the point that kind of opportunity becomes real, from the point that sale happens, all the way through to when we're shipping the material out the door and supporting that EPC to actually construct our product.
And it's real people that they can talk to. They're not going to get some automated AI robot saying, press 8 and all this kind of stuff. People are able to get through and say, hey, I'm out here on the job site. I've got this problem. Can you give me some help on that? They're going to actually be able to talk to somebody on the VCT team that can really help them out.
Yeah, you got it. We're actively working on more than 10 carport projects right now, and at various stages of pre-construction, active construction. So at any given time, we're kind of diving into different chapters or different levels of detail of executing these projects. So happy to support.
No, I love that. And thinking from the construction side of it, if you can always calculate and say, all right, here's a size lift I need, here's this or this, but you guys are going to be able to say, hey, you probably check this, but here's what typically this size project is going to need equipment wise. I think that is very valuable too. It just helps to reinforce and maybe take a step out from, what these EPCs are having to do day in and day out. Coming from folks like you that are EPCs that are now producing this great product. Gosh, I think that's fantastic. Well,
yeah, and we really try to not make assumptions. So for a project that we're mobilizing in about a week. A couple of weeks ago here in our parking lot, we did some test assemblies. We brought some of the pieces out of the frame and we said, okay, how is this going to actually work? Because it was a bit of a constrained site that this one is going to get installed at. So, there's some site trailers and we weren't sure if there was going to be even ground. And so we tried it. We didn't want to get on the phone and start talking as if we knew and not really be speaking to the situation as it was unfolding. So we gave it a shot and we worked out some kinks and we got our construction time down by we kept cutting it. It went from assembling one frame in about 45 or 50 minutes down to 15, 16 minutes. Because we just tried some things differently. We said, well, what if we added an extra person? Would that help? Oh, actually, that doesn't really help. So maybe if we were on the phone and we were just throwing out suggestions, some of them might land, but some of them might not be helpful. Versus going out and trying some, we have different tools to be able to suggest.
Oh, I think that's a key distinction from my experience in 30 plus years in power gen and overall construction. You guys care. You're able to be, to get you guys on the phone, to get answers. In this story you just told, Patrick, that's, you don't hear about that. I have rarely heard of those types of situations. I'm not saying they don't happen, but it seems it's less and less these days. So that's a huge differentiator in my mind of what you guys bring. So
Russ, it was pretty cool. By the third time around, I thought we were done. And then it was one of the field guys who said, no, let's take it all apart and do it again. I want to beat my time.
Well, you got to love that too. That's again, says the kind of passion that your folks have. It's not a job. It's more of a purpose. They're trying to find the best way to get this thing put together and help improve that productivity and the economics of these systems, which are so important to this entire industry. So I really applaud that. Fantastic. Zach, Patrick, thanks so much for joining us today. I mean, to me, it's very clear that Heliostation, it's more than a product. It's a smarter, faster, more scalable way to power the clean energy future, and especially when you're talking about EVs and a lot of these different things that we've got into. So let me ask, if you're a developer, an EPC, facility owner, interested in learning more about this system, or working with VCT, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you guys? Zach, I'll throw that one at you.
Yeah, sure. So, we've got a website. It's vctgroup.com. You can find lots of information there, including an email address to reach out at. So for anyone who's considering a project or wants to see what our product would look like as potentially part of one of their projects, we're happy to talk. We're happy to get you some information. We're happy to say hello, give you a chance to meet us and find out who we are and find out how our product might be a fit for you.
Oh, fantastic. And of course, Next Gen, we're working with you guys too. So feel free to reach out to us and we can help facilitate and get that put together for you. So, hey, that's it for this episode. Thanks again for listening. And we're going to see everybody next time on the Clean Energy Edge.